Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 2 of the Q&A, so let's go ahead and knock this out. Alright, first question. One single compound for the hamstring to balance out the legs. I'm in a home gym doing bench, squat, press, rows, and chins 3 times a week and can only fit in one more lift. Thanks for the advice as always, coach. I don't see any sort of deadlift there. I don't see a deadlift, brother. Why aren't you doing a deadlift of some type? If you're worried about balancing out your hamstrings, some sort of deadlift would be a good idea, right? Pretty straightforward. You're missing a basic movement. You don't have any hip hinges of any type in here, right? Now, I don't know why you need rows and chins. Both every workout, that's up to you. But I think once you add some deadlifts in, you might even need to consider taking one of those out or rotating them every other workout. Just my thoughts on it. All right, next question. Hey coach, after years of making very little progress in running training programs I have no business running, I finally came to the conclusion that I'm a noob and am now starting Madcows 5x5. I feel like the volume is a bit low, so my question is how would I go about adding accessory work / additional exercises, and what numbers would you like to see a lifter hit on a program like this before moving on to something like concurrent style training? I wouldn't even be looking at concurrent style training till you can probably squat 365 for reps. Deadlift over 400 for reps, bench 245, 250 for reps, something in that range. That's what I'd like to see before anyone starts messing with concurrent periodization. You need to be running some sort of pretty much linear style program if you're not hitting those sort of numbers, even if it's slow linear progression. And as far as the volume goes, it depends on where you're at. If you really do feel that you're a noob, then again, I would define a noob as a healthy young man who's still benching less than 2 plates, squatting less than 3 plates, deadlifting less than 4 plates aside, right? You're still a noob. You may not need more volume. And as far as accessories go, you need to add them in as they're necessary, right? You add them in as they're necessary. You add them in for weak points. And again, it comes down to weak points. You need to remember, not everyone has weak points. Not everyone has weak points. And in many cases, when you go back to the noob, it's what I always say, noobs don't have weak points either. Your entire body is a weak point, so you don't need to specialize in anything. Accessory work is there for people who need to specialize in something a little bit because some performance or muscle or movement pattern is lagging behind and it needs specialization to get caught back up, right? So that's what the whole purpose of accessory work. So you add it in as needed. And if you're just starting out on a program like that and you haven't really run a proper structured program for your level of experience, you might not need any accessories. You might need to spend 6 to 8 weeks just doing the basic program. All right, next question. Hi Jason, just wanted to know your opinion on weight training from a young age such as early teens. Does it affect height development, as people always say weight training will stunt your growth? Is that true to a degree? What do you mean people always say that? Who are these people? You mean lazy 16-year-olds who are scared to squat and deadlift? That's who says that. Who in the hell told you? Who's they? Who are these people? No expert I know says stuff like that. So who is this they you're talking about? That's complete nonsense. What you're talking about is a physial plate slippage, which is relatively rare, and if you use good form, doesn't happen at all. Doesn't happen at all. So what you need to be thinking about is the fact that if anything, proper weight training would help you reach your height potential. It would help you reach your height potential. And there's plenty of guys out there who started training very young who are over 6 feet tall. So I'm not sure where you get this idea. And if anything, if a person has it in their mind to start training in their early teens and they can do so correctly, they're going to be at an enormous advantage over everyone else for the rest of their life. In other words, that's the person who is going to probably reach their true natural limits, right? That's the person who's going to reach their genetic potential. You'll never reach your full genetic drug-free potential, most likely, if you start training in your 20s. That's just the reality of it. The guy who starts at 13, that's the guy who's going to reach that lean 25 fat-free mass index, because it's not just genetics like everyone says, it's epigenetics. I legitimately don't believe, based upon the data, that certain people have the capacity to hold more muscle mass than others. I think it's an epigenetic situation, largely more than anything. And yes, someone starts training at 13 or 14, they're going to be far, far more likely to reach their overall potential. And no, it's not going to stunt your growth. No experts in strength and conditioning that I know of say that. So I don't know who these people are who always say that. I see silly ass teenagers say that because they're scared to squat and deadlift because they're lazy. That's it. That's the only people who say that. All right, next question. Jason, I'm on the go a lot and have to slam meals in the car. Just wondering what your thoughts are on protein sources like beef jerky, if they're a decent source to rely on. Thanks. Interesting question. I would have to ask, really, what do you mean by on the go? Because here's what it comes down to. Some people think that this is necessary because they think they have to get protein in 6 or 7 times a day. When the reality is 3 to 4 good sized servings of protein a day is actually going to give you the best you're going to hope to get from overall muscle protein synthesis. So, how much do you mean you're really on the go a lot? I mean, are you telling me you never have a break? You can't stop to eat once every 6 or 7 hours? Right, that's what I've got to ask. And maybe you do. Maybe you have a job where you spend a lot of time in a vehicle for 12 hours a day, whatever. Certain types of work do require that. They're relatively rare. And maybe that's you, in which case I would say beef jerky and stuff's perfectly fine. The problem with beef jerky is going to be the cost of the protein. Like, you're going to pay an enormous premium per gram of protein for beef jerky, right? That's the biggest downside. That's really the only downside that I can think of off the top of my head that's going to be a problem. It's just the cost associated with it. But it's still just meat protein. It's just animal source protein like anything else. It doesn't get destroyed or ruined by the process. You could definitely use it as a protein source on the go. I mean, it tastes good. Usually. It's convenient, easy to deal with. It's just that it's very expensive. And, again, if you're on the go so much for maybe your job, maybe you're making that type of money that you don't care that you're spending an extra, $10 a day on your protein source. But what I would point out is that odds are you're not quite as busy as you think in regards to that. Maybe you are, maybe you aren't. But, you need to remember, it's not that you need to get protein in like every 2 or 3 hours or any of the silly bodybuilder stuff. That stems from the fact that bodybuilders pen insulin every 2 hours. That's kind of where that comes from. That's where that comes from in the pro bodybuilding world. Most pro bodybuilders are penning insulin every 2 hours, and they need that quick intake of amino acids to hopefully shuttle it into muscle tissue by the insulin that they're injecting all the time. All right, and they need carbs to go with it so that they don't go hypoglycemic and die. Normal people don't need to worry about this so much. 3 to 4 good feedings a day. So if that means with your job, your work, you might have to do some in the middle of your car once a day, that's fine. So beef jerky is probably perfectly acceptable. All right, next question and last question of the week. As a drug-free lifter who passed a 300-pound bench press linearly installed, what should I do to bypass the biological law of accommodation if concurrent periodization is not something you endorse due to the rotating lifts? Please help me. I want more gains. What does concurrent periodization have to do with rotating lifts? What? I think you're confusing the conjugate method, which is one specific training program that uses concurrent periodization. All right. You're using concurrent periodization if you have a higher intensity, lower volume day on your bench once a week, and you have a higher volume, slightly lighter intensity day once a week. In other words, it doesn't even have to be rep ranges. If on Monday you come in and you ramp to a max triple on your bench press, and then Thursday you do 7 or 10 triples with a lighter weight on your bench press, you're using concurrent periodization. Right? That has nothing to do with rotating lifts. I think if you've been listening to Alpha Destiny too much, like, you need to ignore that clown. All right, don't listen to him if you want good training advice. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Now, as far as that goes, the biological law of accommodation, don't replicate the exact workout more than 3 times in a row, more than 3 weeks straight. Really, that's the best way to avoid it. In other words, you're going to start getting the repeat bout effect, and you're going to start getting diminished returns each time you replicate the exact same training stimulus. Bypassing the biological law of accommodation, you could literally add 1 set or 1 rep or change a variable every 3 weeks, and you'll bypass it. I mean, you could change your grip width by 2 inches, by 1 inch on each side every 3 weeks, and that will bypass the law of accommodation. If you're doing 6 sets of 3, you could go to 7 sets of 3. You could slightly alter your rep range, your loading pattern, in 3-week blocks, and you will bypass the biological law of accommodation. That's literally all you have to do. It's just an understanding that the exact same training stress will get diminished returns over time, and after about 3 weeks, you will stop adapting and growing from it. That's generally all it means. Any minor shift in training stimulus will give you a slightly different training effect and will bypass it. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.